Item 5B is a Hurricane Irma status report from Dan Summers, your Director of the Bureau of Emergency Services. Mr. Summers?
Commissioners, good morning. For the record, Dan Summers, Director of your Bureau of Emergency Services and Emergency Management, and I'm happy to be with you again, and thank you again for those very kind words this morning with the proclamation. Give you a brief update this morning. Certainly kind of a time warp for all of us. Seems like we've been working this issue for a very long time, and as I mentioned before, response is hard and recovery is harder, and the team continues to work very hard in all of these areas. Today, let me just quickly go over three key areas, survivor and neighbor assistance, as well as debris removal, and see if you have any questions or comments towards the end today. Again, the numbers for FEMA registration have climbed a little bit. Our last report to you, 69,000 people had applied for assistance in Collier County. That number now is 71,505. We continue to see moderate amount of traffic at the Golden Gate Community Center for FEMA registration. I am working with FEMA in the state. I want that Disaster Recovery Center to pay another visit both in Immokalee and Everglades City, not only to give folks the last minute opportunity for FEMA registration, but to ask questions of the FEMA staff as they go through the FEMA assistance process. We want to make sure that you understand that FEMA, I think, has done a pretty good job in getting out some individual and family assistance. $8,530,000 have been made available for housing or other emergent needs in Collier County, and that's up from $7.1 million in FEMA assistance. 35 families are in hotels outside of Collier County, and that's down from 62. That's a good trend. We hope folks are getting resituated back into the county. 95 families were in hotels in Collier County, and that's down from 162. But at least those folks had an opportunity to catch their breath and are getting the additional housing options available to them. Housing inspections, if you'll remember, that was running way behind the curve with FEMA. It is necessary for a FEMA inspector to come out for some of this assistance program, as well as assistance programs, as well as temporary housing. 24,211 inspections have been completed. That's 94% of the 25,000 FEMA inspections that were necessary. So they did, in fact, increase the staff at our request and have done a much better job. This next bullet needs to be corrected on your PowerPoint handout this morning. 85 families are eligible for FEMA supplied housing. 22 have moved in. That's up from 17. As you know, I'm still not happy with the progress there, but I did speak with the housing coordinator at length yesterday. And this, if you remember when I reported to you last, FEMA had significant increases in their ability to pay rent to the fair market rental rate, and there was a hang-up, so to speak, on some of their lease agreements and utilities. That was corrected, and they expect to go full bore very quickly on this apartment rental program. So I'm counting on much bigger numbers next go around, as well as the trailer and programs are still continuing. $21 million has been provided for additional housing assistance, and again, that can be in the form of relocation, rental, and other lease options. It's important to make sure that we remind folks that FEMA has to have a method for validation. That's their inspection process. And the home damages that people experience must be disaster related. We're seeing where folks are making FEMA applications, but deferred maintenance is not something that they can address. It has to be specifically storm related, and sometimes that causes a little bit of confusion, but we think they're working through those challenges. The last is a great opportunity and speaks well of our private nonprofit efforts in the community. Salvation Army, Catholic Ministries, Red Cross, Immokalee Interagency participants, United Way, and the Community Foundation of Collier County are really expanding their client assistance services. Salvation Army, as you know, has opened up a disaster assistance service center across the street. They are working in partnership with FEMA and other agencies to provide some direct client services, and that system is getting better and stronger every day. We can't say enough about the generosity of the community and the generosity of the United Way and Community Foundation to help make some of these resources available. So there's a lot going on in the scenes that our local nonprofits know these clients and can provide some excellent services. I want to stress the FEMA aid process and what's necessary. And again, it's important that when you make the telephone call or you log into disasterassistance.gov or go to the Disaster Recovery Center, that you have this information available to you. We're running down on the time window for FEMA registration. We've had one extension. I doubt seriously we're going to get another. November the 29th is the last day for FEMA registration. That will include both online as well as by telephone and in person. And FEMA is not, their folks are going to now take a little bit of a break, and they will no longer be open on Sundays through the rest of their tour, but they will be open 6 days a week for these disaster recovery centers. Just a friendly reminder what to expect. Again, we continue to hear where folks are getting calls from FEMA but are not returning those calls. It's real important to stay with that process, work through the SBA applications that are provided to you, and make sure that you close the loop with FEMA in order to get that process started. And again, these disaster assistance centers can help with questions and concerns that folks may have along the way. Let me jump into debris removal real quick. And I know that there's a new report this morning, so my slide was done on November the 12th, 2.6 million cubic yards of horticultural waste, running somewhere around 190 to 197 trucks every day. Just a phenomenal effort, in my opinion. 55 to 65,000 cubic yards of debris are being picked up every day. And now it's starting to, it will get a little bit harder as some of these more difficult loads are going to be out there, as well as the stumps and the leaners and some of those other things. But again, a great spirit of attack as far as I'm concerned. So again, some of the activities, you'll notice I've got that chainsaw in the picture there. What's going on now are some of the challenging debris removal activities, and Dan Rodriguez's team and Ash Brett will continue to step up to hit some of these this next line of challenges with the cleanup. The debris sites, those are standard. Nothing has changed, I believe, with the exception of the Immokalee Transfer Station. I don't believe we clarified that was closed on Sunday, nor the Carnstown Recycling Center also closed on Sunday. And everyone seems to have a pretty good understanding now of our debris sorting and our mission and our piles, how that's worked together. Two other things are in the loop here, of course. As you know, there's quite a challenge with FEMA and working with gated communities. I think we have excelled with that with the modification to the emergency management ordinance, which addressed that, as well as the right of entry process, and certainly good damage assessment and good estimate information that went into FEMA. That's quite a challenge, and that approval has been provided, as well as that necessary effort to get right of entry forms signed that our debris monitoring contractor is helping the team with. So that's a real quick overview. Wanted to see if you had any other questions or concerns that I could help you with this morning, Commissioner.
Yes, I just heard some sad stories coming out. We have a lot of mobile home parks in the East Naples area, and a lot of them are the lower income seniors. And their only investment, they live there year round, their only investment was their trailer, except that there's nothing left of it. And they're hauling them away right now off of these pieces of land. But because they don't own the land underneath, they have nothing to even try and get a loan with. I know that we have dollars that come into our housing department, as well as we had $3 million to help people. Will that be available to people like this who really don't have anything, and they would need at least down payment assistance in order to put a new trailer on that piece of property?
Ma'am, it's my understanding that the best route for that is that SBA loan. And that SBA loan is very, very minimal in terms of interest rate, seems to be relatively easy to qualify for. So that's the direction that I have. We'll be glad to research and see what other options
Yeah, we
might
give,
be available.
We give $30,000 to people as a down payment assistance when they have that much in a bank account, so, on affordable housing. So I would think that we should have money available to these people.
Well, other programs, other things such as other HUD or CDBG, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what those options are. But again, let me encourage these individuals, don't give up on that FEMA process. It is a little frustrating. There is a little bit of paperwork involved there, but that may, in fact, even for a renter, still be another option with them to consider for the purchase of that trailer.
Commissioner, if you have any contact information, if you'd please get it to me, I'll make sure that we reach out to them.
I would love to
Make
do
sure that we coordinate every opportunity for assistance.
Great. I think that we would, you would be like riding in on your white
Yeah,
horse.
we're
and helping.
very happy to do that. Just
Great,
any
thank
of the
you.
commissioners that have a name or contact information, if you could send it to me, we'll coordinate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, oh, I'm sorry.
My light's still on. And I
see
just
your
wanted
light.
to, I wanted to say that both Leo and Nick have been very good with me with specific requests. Information, when someone has a specific request, our staff's done an amazing job. So if anybody does have a specific need, and direct it to your commissioner, and we'll make sure it gets through the proper channels. And I do know that there is some large federal money been appropriated by the Congress for CDBG funding, which can be utilized as a portion of the housing mission. We had a meeting over in Immokalee, I think 2 weeks ago, with regard to that. So there is the white horses trotting. I have a couple of questions with regard to debris, and I don't know if you're ready to answer, if you want to bring Dan up.
Let's bring Dan up. We'll phone a friend here.
Are you scared?
No, I'm not.
Madam Chair, while he's coming up, I know that we do have 3 citizens that wanted to speak on this subject. Under your rules, you don't take comment under presentations. The next item is public comment. We could roll them right in there, and it will fit with this conversation, but it's related, I think, to debris removal and some other things.
Right after, good.
So when the board's done, we'll just move to public comment and get them up first, if that's all right with you.
Yes, no, that's, unless I have an objection up here. No, it's.
No, that's a good
fine.
idea.
Looking forward to it.
All right, Mr. Dan. I have 3 things. First off, are the transfer sites still receiving debris from private individuals at no fee?
We are, Commissioner.
And would you name those transfer sites? Can you? I think there's 2 that were.
2 of them.
Yes.
There's actually the one in Immokalee, the transfer site there at the Immokalee landfill that's been closed. We also have a site at the CVS at Santa Barbara and Davis.
Okay.
We have a monitor there, so when you do come with the debris, they check your load, they get your information, and then they let you dispose of it for free.
And very specifically, it's a matter of asking questions that you already know the answer to. But I just wanted to be very specific. Do not look like a commercial hauler or someone that is doing commercial debris cleanup as a private resident. So don't even look like one when you're coming there with the debris from your own home. But the transfer fees are in fact waived.
Great recommendation.
Number 2, how many rounds of pickup are we scheduled to in fact do? I've been getting a lot of questions with regard to that, and I know there's still a lot of residents that have yet to have their debris picked up from the original storm event, and now those that have been picked up are seeing new material coming out. How many rounds are slated for the debris removal?
There's actually 3 slated for the debris collection.
Okay.
As you stated, we're getting close to the end of the first one, but we still have areas that we still have to do that first collection pickup, and then we'll start our second. And then the third, we'll probably be picking up hot spots where we might have missed someone or someone. We're still getting a lot of snowbirds coming down, and so we want to.
Those are our northern residents.
Northern residents. Being a former Michigander, I can relate. But absolutely, we'll make sure we give them the opportunity to put their debris out. In fact, I got a couple texts from a couple people
Right.
asking, hey, don't forget about us. So.
Right, and I've just been hearing it's very sporadic with the pickup. They're coming down half a street and then not coming back to get the other half. And again, as I said, there's still a fairly large portion. And I know we're working our way from the urbanized area out, but there's still a fairly large portion that have yet to even have the first round. And I'm already getting questions about how many rounds we're actually, in fact, going to do. So thank you on that. Last but not least, and probably the most contentious point, is these transfer sites where we are taking debris. Are we grinding at every single one of those transfer sites?
We are, Commissioner. So your main 5 sites, we have grinders there, and the goal is to reduce that material. It's a reduction from 4 to 1, and to get it out as quickly as possible so that we can get back to recovery of that site.
Okay, I've had several people over in waterways that our winds have been coming out of the northeast in the recent past, wonderful weather, but not so good for dust and debris that's generated by the grinding operations are flowing over into those residential neighborhoods. And as a request, and I understand it's an arduous task, but it's a 7-day-a-week operation. Daylight till dark, basically, and if there's any way to manage that so that it's a little less arduous on the residents that are close, as much as can be done, it's a difficult when you're the one that's sitting across the bushes and your pool's being in cars and vehicles, and there are issues that travel along with that from potential debris and such. Relatively speaking, it's going to be over soon, but everyone is participating equally where these transfer sites have been located.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And
Okay.
we'll put more resources to it, and certainly work with the neighbors and make sure we keep the noise down as much as we can, and also the dust. We do have water trucks on all the sites. We have people that monitor the safety operations, so we're all ears. If there's anything we can do better, we'll certainly do our best.
Particularly the one out at the fairgrounds has had quite a bit heading into the waterways subdivision. So if we could ramp that up a little bit, that would be a big help.
Oh, Mr. Solis.
Dan, just again, for purposes of educating the public, can you go through what's required for the gated communities to have pickup of the debris? That seems to be the biggest issue, at least in my district. And if you can, talk a little bit about condominiums that may have gates. I think there's a lot of confusion out there. It might be gated, but if it's a condominium community, then there might be some differences there on how it's being dealt with, right?
As you know, there's over 440 gated communities in Collier County. A little more than half of those still have debris in them where they haven't collected. They wanted to wait for FEMA to get the approval. So about 2 months ago, thanks to the chairwoman, we sent a letter to FEMA asking them to get approval to go into gated communities because the guidelines under FEMA are very strict, and Dan Summers can tell you all day long. You don't want to pick up one stick unless you want to pay for that. This debris mission is going to cost between $77 and $100 million. So everything we can do as the guidance from the county manager and the board to get those dollars back, we need to follow their paperwork. Part of that paperwork is to get a release from the gated community homeowners association that holds the county and FEMA harmless. It's a requirement, and in order to get reimbursement. So once we get that release from the gated community, we go in and assess the amount of debris, and then we allocate the resources. And that's been working fairly well. A lot of gated communities wanted to be first out of the gate. We're working through that. We're probably in about close to 80 of those gated communities now, and we'll move in the rest as the weeks continue. Absolutely.
And is there any difference if it's a homeowners association as opposed to a condominium?
No, it's considered gated community, or if it's private property. I'm sorry, gated community or private road. We can go into the private roads and we can go into gated community. So if it's a homeowners association or it's gated, we just need the release. So there's no difference.
Okay.
And just for point of clarification, I had nothing to do with this. It was the guidance and the leadership of County Manager Oakes and his team that from the beginning, as soon as that storm was coming in, the concern was, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make sure that FEMA reimburses us? How are we going to manage this incredible storm that's coming in? You just told me what to sign, and I signed it. So your leadership is extraordinary. Thank you both, all of you.
Here, here.
Yes.
And I would just like to make, and this is just a general suggestion, and maybe this is already being done, but the presentation that Dan just gave and the answers to your questions would be a great thing to have on YouTube or something for the public to be able to find I know it's on our website, but if there's another way to get that out there in a format that people can see, I think that might be helpful.
We'll do it. We'll do it.
Dan, if you could, we get a lot of calls about drainage easements, and just touch on that real quick, if you could, too.
Absolutely. We're probably moving the fourth phase of this program, and that's to start cleaning out some of the drainage areas, the canals, things like that. So working with our contractor as well as with our FEMA representatives, we're identifying those canals that the county's responsible for, that the state's responsible for, as well as South Florida Water Management District, as well as the Coast Guard, and laying out a game plan and resources to get to those. So you should see that begin, as Nick outlined, probably within the next 2 weeks.
Does that mean like the storm drains too that are next to the curb?
That's correct. The swales that have filled with sand and silt and things like that. So we're working directly with Travis Gossett and the Transportation Group, identify all those because that all costs money. And again, the FEMA does have reimbursement programs for that.
And Madam Chair, just one quick comment, if I may. Mr. Dan, would you please repeat the discussion in the gated communities and the differentiation between association-owned properties and private residents? Because if I recall, there was a differentiation in those with who was responsible for that debris removal.
If you're in a gated community, under the normal guidelines from FEMA, you have to get their permission to go in there to remove debris. So we have to first get FEMA's approval to go in and collect, and then of course we got to comply with their form to do that. If you're a private resident on private property, you have a public road. Under their current guidelines, we can collect that as a normal business.
And how about the association common areas?
Because it is in the gated community, you have to be careful. If there's country clubs, common areas, golf courses where you have damage from trees, those properties are insured, and FEMA requires that you go through your insurance company. But if it's a single-family resident in a gated community, those are eligible for collection. Great point, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dan Sullivan, please. I got a call, perhaps it was last week or the week before, where Department of Children and Families was distributing SNAP extraordinarily, forgot about food stamps. Not in Everglades City, not in Immokalee, but Fort Myers in Lee County, and I'm understanding they're not going to come back. And there was one resident apparently from Everglades City who spent 7 hours only to be turned away. It was 2 hours up there, he waited in line, it started to rain, they folded the tents, and they went home.
And left them standing in line.
Left them standing in line. And I'm understanding, I did appeal to Senator Pasadomo's office, and she went and talked to them, but is there any possibility of them coming back to Collier County where the eye of the storm was?
I also was aware of that, and also made my complaints and frustration, notified state EOC about that, and asked that to be revisited. I have not yet gotten a reply as well for an additional offering, but it's my understanding if it's not in place today, it's being looked at that the Salvation Army Center that is opening up across the street will have an application location. So let me confirm that, but it was my understanding that they were going to try to make a service center available for that. Now, obviously, the other applications and the other assistance programs are still in place. It's just that we don't have that regional delivery. We ask for that in Immokalee. We ask for that in Everglades City as well. Maybe we can go back and revisit another option again. But I was keenly aware and not happy with that service delivery. I think Representative Pasadomo's help would be appreciated, and I'll double check with Salvation Army and see if that service is going to be made available.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank